الحمد لله رب العالمين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه: ومن آياته خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف ألسنتكم وألوانكم إن في ذلك لآيات للعالمين. Among his signs are the creation of the heaven and earth and the diversity in your culture and language and your appearance. Indeed, in this there is a sign for those who think and contemplate. Surah Rum, verse number 22. Before I begin, I would like to take the opportunity and offer my condolence on the Arba'een program, first and foremost to our living Imam alayhi salatu wassalam, and to all the brothers and sisters within our community, those who are present and those who are not. This is unfortunately the concluding meeting or gathering or lecture. The focus is on the unity within human diversity. How do we explain it from an Islamic perspective? If you look at the Holy Quran, we certainly come across a number of verses that directly or indirectly alludes to this human diversity and at the same time unity. Diversity and unity, or unity within diversity. The verse that I recited, room number 22, calls the reader to be mindful that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who has created the heaven and earth. And within this rationale of the creation, also the diverse creation of human beings, with different language, different appearance, different culture. It's intended. Once you add this verse to another verse in Surah Al-Hujurat, verse number 13, which has become now a truism, everyone that talks about Islamic diversity and unity immediately jumps to this verse. Ya ayyuhan nas, إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَىٰ وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. Indeed, we have created you from a pair, one man and one woman. And then we turned you into tribes and nations. For what purpose? This is not in vain. There is a clear reason for the creation of diversity, لِتَعَارَفُوا. Here, exegetes and scholars have really gone wild as exactly what it means. You have the mystics going in one direction, the literalists going in another direction, the philosophers going in another direction. Go and pick up few of the tafasirs that we have today, and you will see when you get to this Hujurat number 13, the orientation of the mufassir or the exegist. Marhum Tabatabai in his Tafsir al-Mizan goes in one direction. If you look at more spiritual interpretation and exegesis of Quran, they look at it. What it says that in the second calls people to understand, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is responsible for the creation of the world, Allah has intended for the diversity to exist. As a challenge to human being, how to turn the diverse creation into a convergence and working together. There is another verse in Surah An-Nisa, O mankind, be conscious of your Lord, who created you from male and female, and from that male and female scattered many men, tribes, and nations around. Everything clearly indicates that if there is a creator, there is a purpose for the diversity that exists. The challenge for us is to how to bridge and integrate or create a society in which at the same time diversity and unity, human diversity and unity coexist. Here, to a degree, we can cite some of the narratives or the work that we discussed during the last few nights regarding individualism and collectivism comes to assist. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly indicates that there is a purpose for creation and there is a purpose for diversity. At the same time, Allah says that we have created and we have sent the guidance so that humans work together in the establishment of the correct and what we call the just society. Justice, by definition, should be blind to what we call the superficial differentiation. Color, creed, nation, tribes, and so on should not be the one that differentiates, but it's taqwa. If you look at the history of Quran, how many of you have had a chance to look at Ibn Khaldun's Muqaddamah? In the Muqaddamah, Ibn Khaldun cites a fact, historical fact, when it comes to Islam. He says, if you pay attention to the Islamic civilization, the beginning of the Islamic civilization was in an Arab land. The founding figure of this civilization was an Arab. But majority of those who participated in the creation of Islamic civilization were non-Arabs. Diverse community. Islam came to create the space for them to feel free, not to be bashful about their unique individualism, to come forward and participate. Whether it is within philosophical field, or within, say, religious field, within scientific field, or any other research, we have people, majority of them coming from other field. Those of you who specialize in reading and studying philosophy, Henry Corbin, which is the French philosopher and Orientalist to a degree, spent a number of years in Iran working with Sayyid Hussein Nasr as well as Marhum Allama Tabatabai, and he comes and he has a number of books on the Islamic civilization. The role of Shia, but particularly on the role of what we call non-Arabs, the contribution that they made. Different, various other cultures that make contribution for the establishment and development of Islamic civilization. Why? Because we have to, again, to engage that narrative or the language that we had regarding individualism versus collectivism. Islam respects the individualistic approach of these unique communities. And at the same time, by bringing in the concept and celebrating the differences that exist and claiming or accepting the fact that every single human being has an inherent dignity that we should respect, we have a hadith, طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم ومسلمة. Seeking knowledge is an obligation on every single Muslim, irrespective of gender, creed, and so on, which obligates people. People from Bukhara, they come Sahih Bukhari. Muslim from Iran, and a number of others from other parts of the world. They came, they felt free. That so long as they had something to contribute for the establishment or to development of Islamic civilization, the space was available for them. Nobody asked them, where you come from, this part of the world or that part of the world, or this color or that color, or this historical background or that historical background. This is something that we really need to focus upon. The unity of mankind. There remains one question that we really need to ask and address. There are verses in the Holy Quran that clearly asks for the unity of the community. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. That commands Muslims to be united. Then how do we integrate this notion or homogenize the notion of unity of the society with the respect for diversity that exists, that Islam claims should be part of the culture? If we engage the conversation we had, or re-engage the conversation that we had a few nights ago regarding the individualism, diversity should exist within the context of individualism. But once a collective is being established, any kind of class differentiation, any kind of categories that leads to deviation and the difference must be eliminated. I remain who I am within the individualistic field. But when it comes to the establishment of the community, we need to be united. Otherwise, without the unity, the power will be absent. And by the way, if you look at the history of colonialism, wherever they moved, the first thing that they did, they literally broke the unity of the community to pieces, where now instead of the colonizers spending huge amount of time, wealth, and so on, fighting these, the community began fighting itself. This became apparent, particularly after 9/11, occupation of Afghanistan, and specifically occupation of Iraq, and then Syria and everything else. Suddenly, we have a policy clearly defined. We spend huge amount of money to put Shias against Sunnis. If this doesn't work, we put the Kurds against the Arab. If that doesn't work, we put the Iranian against the Arab. If that doesn't work, we put the Turks against everybody else. And we create a mishmash in which they are fighting each other. Tel Aviv lives in peace. The enemy is somewhere else. We have redirected the attention through red herrings to killing ourselves under the banner of democracy and everything else. Unity and plurality should work in the same manner from an Islamic perspective, in the same manner that individualism and collectivism were brought together as part of one synthesis. Diversity and unity should reflect here as well. Remember, concept of Tawheed must percolate in the society. And the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we all one. There is no distinction. There are verses in the Holy Quran that removes any distinction as far as gender, or orientation, or faith, or anything else. As long as you remain faithful to the goal of the society, you can make a contribution to the society. Diversity in one field and unity in another. 20th century, unfortunately, stands a witness for many attempts by one institution or the other to bring unity of to bring human unity together under one banner of the other. Initially started from around 1920 with the League of Nations, and then came United Nations and a number of other institutions. They all failed. These organizations all failed. Because part of this balance between unity and diversity is to be able to bring together the mind and the heart of members of the community. If you go back to the early history of Islam, I think this story, I might have mentioned it here before. The Holy Prophet moves to Medina and creates this space called the Mosque of Medina, identifies this unique place that we are going to build the mosque, and creates the concept of brotherhood and sisterhood between those who are the immigrant and those who are living in Medina. It's this social consciousness, the fact that you have brought these individuals together, that the mind and the heart fuses and understands that it has a responsibility towards other people. One night he walks into the mosque and finds the richest man in Medina living in the mosque by himself. So the Prophet naturally comes in to ask, "You son so and so, you are the wealthiest individual in Medina. You have a big house and a tribe, etc., etc. What are you doing in the mosque? I would expect the immigrant to come over here and find no place, and they come to the mosque to take refuge, not you." And this is within a short period of time. He said, "Ya Rasulullah, you told us that these are our brothers and sisters, and we respected and we followed your command. I have a large house with many rooms. I divided the rooms between various families, immigrant families that they come to Medina. I took the smallest room for myself. I put my family in that room. There is not enough room for myself to be in that room that I have chosen for my family. And I have to come to the mosque and stay there." In a short period of time. These are people, Aus and Khazraj, Yahud and Arab, and others that were fighting each other beforehand. What was so unique about this faith that was able to bridge these differences and push the Muslims not to focus on superficial issues, but to focus on more concrete, the fact that we live in this society together and we must fight our enemy and our cause together, irrespective of where we come from. As soon as we begin, the whole nationhood state, Sykes-Picot of the 1920s, was done deliberately to divide the Muslim community. The piece of land, huge piece of land, the Middle East, that I, living in Najaf, I could go to Jerusalem without being asked. I could go to Mecca to study without being told anything. I could go to Bukhara and Dushanbe without being asked any question if there are teachers and professors around. I could go to Shiraz and Isfahan School of Philosophy without being asked anything. Suddenly there was an artificial. Becomes one country, another part becomes another country. And you cannot cross the boundary. How many of you are from Iraq? Now we have Iranians on the Iraqi border because Iraq is unable to swallow such a huge number. Now they have reached a point. This, to the right of it is Iran, to the left of it is Iraq, and you cannot cross the boundary. Amman, you want to go to the West Bank, it becomes a different state. What we need to do is to be mindful of these challenges. Islam says, keep your unique identity. But when it comes to the social structure, all classes, all mechanism that divides you have to be eliminated. Whether it is class, whether it's wealth, whether it's various what we call idols, whatever it is, it has to be eliminated. We need to work together for the sake of the collective, while preserving our own unity. This is a challenge, the conflict that we have to deal with. Just think about it. We are living in the beginning of the 21st century. Technology there. Wealth is there. Scientific development is there. And advances all there, yet humanity is sinking into the abyss. We have more wars, more misery, more poverty, more illiteracy, and everything else. Despite the so-called institutions that are there to support, bring unity and collectivity between people. 20th century saw the biggest sacrifice of humanity ever that history has seen. There is a book I recommend for the younger brothers. I don't know whether the older ones, brothers and sisters, want to look at it. There is a book called How the Other Half Dies. Read it. I don't know whether the new edition is out, but the one I have is an older edition. When you live in a society particularly as this, that you dump tons and tons of wheat into the sea, despite the poverty and the destitution that exists around the world, because you don't want the price to drop. If you have in Europe the collective, so-called collectivity, they spend billions of pounds and dollars and so on to preserve the butter temperature in the silos, and they are not prepared to give it to anybody else, to the poor and the needy. Something has happened to humanity. If the amount of wealth which being spent in this country for war and armament will be enough to deal with poverty, illiteracy, and so on the world over, and the health of everybody else, we have a crisis to deal with. An ethical and moral crisis that we have to deal with. And brothers and sisters, it's your responsibility to begin with. Let's face it. Number one, let me wrap up, because I want to create some times for question and answer. I want to leave you a few words of advice. Number one, you have embarked on a path that as long as you do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will be rewarded, whether you fail or whether you succeed. So be mindful that your partner in this is the divine. Have tawakkul and work hard. That's number one. You have to be mindful of the challenges and the pitfalls and so on that are in front of you, that others did not pay attention and did not succeed. Try to navigate and negotiate your way through the social, cultural, and political maze, but never compromise on your principle. Never compromise on your principle. It's better to reach the goal 1 week, 2 weeks, 6 months late, but principally orientated, than to negotiate those principles. You become like the rest of them. If you want future in this country, political and moral visibility must be there, non-negotiable. Don't fall for the trap of those that say, well, in this country there is a separation of church and state. Or we organize our centers, we never touch politics. The fact that you live in this country is politics. You are benefiting. You are privileged by what happens outside. Somebody else pays the price, you benefit from it. It's politics. You cannot avoid it. There was, over a year ago, Ayatollah Khamenei sent a letter out directly to the youth of the West. Why did he do that? Because people living outside, those of you who are familiar with post-colonial discourse and Fanon's literature, the wretched of the earth, the only thing that they can do is to protect themselves regarding this toxic foreign policy. You are the one that you can use the privilege in this country to change the direction and the orientation. Nobody else. Foreign policy of the state is not going to change by the youth standing up, the fist in the air, mark bar America somewhere else. It's not going to happen. But you organize yourself in this country and challenge the status quo, you can't change. So it is an obligation. Build alliances. Don't rely on yourself. Build alliances in this. And by the way, you don't need allies all the time that agree with everything that you stand for. As long as there are shades and commonalities that you can work with, or ideas, or sometimes some of the principles, work with them. Alliances are needed. Create your own alliances. Be humble, conscientious, open-minded, challenge the status quo, and what the cultural baggage that you have to deal with are not what we call divine scriptures that nobody can touch. Challenge them. They have gained the currency that we have to deal with today because nobody stood up to challenge and say, this is not acceptable. Open up your mind. We, as people that live in this country, that understands the culture, understands the language, that have been to the academic, we can debate and discuss. We have a moral obligation, as I have said it repeatedly during the last few nights, moral obligation. If we cannot make or create an alternatively principled community, at least we can complement it and correct some of the mistakes. Create new paradigm of thinking in the youth. The old paradigm, unfortunately, the best is good for the what we call preserved corners. When you go outside, the old paradigm is not going to work. It's your responsibility. Alhamdulillah, mashallah, boys and girls, you are all educated. Try to think ahead. Plan. Your responsibility is short, medium, and long term. Have a clear plan and objective. How should I approach it now? What should it be the next stage? Where are we as a community, the youth community, are supposed to be in 5 years from now? And where can we be in 10 years from now? Have a plan. I stand to be corrected, brothers and sisters. Walk into any Islamic center and bring the board and ask them, brothers and sisters, where do you want to be in 5 years from now? Ooh, that's a challenging question. A challenging question. Let's fix it for today. Inshallah, we'll see what will happen for tomorrow. It's not going to work. This is why they are threatened by people like yourself. Because you are asking them to reorient the whole structure and say, look, we need planning, we need advice, we are part of the community, we are being challenged, not you. Your language is not up to par anyway. We are the one that has to pay a price. So don't shy away from your responsibility. Finally, all this will be meaningful. There is a verse in the Holy Quran which I wasn't able to recite last night. كل نفس ذائقة الموت وإنما توفون أجوركم يوم القيامة فمن زحزح عن النار وأدخل الجنة فقد فاز. Islam came to reorient and redefine the concept of success and failure. Don't be disillusioned if there are challenges in front of you and you have to step back, reorganize yourself and start again. Why? Because Islamic concept of success is not purely defined in this world. It's hereafter that you have to be mindful of. This is the challenge that you have to pay. And sometimes a very expensive price that you have to pay for taking this initiative. But if you succeed, brothers and sisters, the reward is immense. A redirection of the community, a redirection of the youth, a redirection of the new generation, a new environment for the new generation, new critical thinkers around, that they can challenge the status quo and they can challenge the crisis that our community is facing. The only thing I can do at this stage is pray for your success. I will attempt, inshallah, once I go back, to put you in touch and give your information to a number of very active youth organizations in our community so that they can organize a collaborative work with you. You never know, they might come here, they invite you to come over there and see how this project can be taken off the ground. One of the things that you have to be mindful, I think a few nights ago last night we discussed this. Read about those who started such project before you and find out where did they go wrong and where did they fail. Don't repeat the same mistake. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. When the going gets tough, only the tough get going. The tough means people who are prepared to step back and say, okay, where are we now? How can we change the whole thing around? And we start all over again. It has been a pleasure meeting some old friends or seeing some old friends as well as meeting new ones. I pray that inshallah we remain in touch, and we'll see. I will take this issue up over there and see what we can do from there, one way or the other, inshallah. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.